What's up, fight fans from around the globe? Welcome to the War Room. I am your fight goddess, Chris Baldwin, here with my powerhouse boxing family, Melissa Smith. She's an author and women's boxing historian, and Mr. Eddie Goldman, award-winning sports journalist from No Holds Barred News. Before we get started, please do us a favor and hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. This is sports justice programming highlighting corruption in boxing and sports governance in general. Welcome to the War Room. Now, today we're briefly discussing problems with Probellum. They had a card in Dubai, so we're going to talk about that, plus McLaren's report on corruption in amateur boxing and the IOC's recommendation on what to do with Aiba, because they are a hot mess. And we're going to discuss a little bit of women's boxing with Melissa talking about Katie Taylor's win over Fizura Sharipova. You guys ready to get started? What's up, team?
Yes. Lots of good stuff.
Right? Oh, right,
and it's
exactly.
important to listen because you can get the results of these fights almost anywhere. You can even sometimes get a more or less decent analysis of the fight itself. But what it really signified and what was really going on, that's hard to find, but you will find it here.
That's right. Right here in the War Room. We're going to get started with that. Let's talk about Probellums. That's Richard Schaefer's new venture, and that card jumped off in Dubai. So Eddie, let us hear your analysis on this situation.
Yes, a lot of strange things, although Schaefer is listed as the founder and the head of Probellum, and this was their first card, Probellum Revolution. He wasn't even there in Dubai. He was in California with his fighter, who's also a Probellum fighter, Nonito Donaire, who won his fight on the card that was seen in the US on Showtime, which is kind of interesting. And of course, it's just pure coincidence that Probellum's first show is in Dubai, of all places, and they have the money to fly people in from all around the world for a show that only has minor last-minute TV deals. It was on in the US on Access, AXS, which most people, I said, what's that? And I even had to find it. I actually did get it on my cable company. It was on Free Sports in the UK and I think Ireland. I think it was picked up in Latin America, but it was a last minute deal. So all of a sudden they have this money to fly people in, as you'll hear, from all over the place. And it reflected in the show itself. The whole show started 3 minutes late. It was supposed to start in Eastern time in the US at 11 a.m. Access was showing rock and roll videos till then. And then when it started, they didn't get the audio on till 7 minutes after. So already this was, a harbinger of things to come. They lost their main event, which is supposed to be Casimiro defending his title against Paul Butler. Well, that's not entirely clear. Casimiro said he got ill or something a couple of days before the fight. That was never clear. And then they wanted to have Butler fight Joseph King Kong Agbeko. By the way, that is Joseph King Kong Agbeko. That's not a nickname. That's his real name. And I also share a birthday with him. So just sort of throw that in. Anyway, that fight was going to be the new main event. But that fight didn't happen. No explanation was given for that. And I'm sure money had something to do with all of this stuff. So Sonny Edwards was in the main event, which we'll get to. The TV production was awful. It had bad, washed out lighting that made it hard to see. It had almost no graphics. And my educated guess is that, to put it cryptically, the economics of the show were different from many other shows. Then they had Jalalov, the Olympic gold medalist, who came in 8-0 as a pro with 8 knockouts, although he had a couple losses when he fought in the World Series of Boxing, but they don't count those in the official pro record, which I find kind of bizarre. He lost twice to a Cuban fighter who's still fighting today, who defected from Cuba, went to Europe, but isn't getting a lot of attention. But officially, he was 8-0, going up against a fighter named Calameno, who was originally from Colombia, but Jalalov from Uzbekistan is based in Brooklyn, and Calameno was wearing a T-shirt that said El Bronx. Anyway, Calameno was knocked out in Russia on November 4th, and here on December 11th, he's fighting against a guy 50 pounds heavier than him, who's undefeated and an Olympic gold medalist at Tokyo.
Okay.
And so all it took.
No governance at all in Dubai in terms of, or a commission?
I'll get to the name of the commission in a second. It took exactly one landed punch from Jalalov to knock this guy out. One punch, one knockdown, one knockout at 46 seconds. In terms of the governance, they said there was something called the Middle East Professional Boxing Commission, which I had never heard of before. And I Googled it, and there's no listing for that anywhere. And if it's something that, even if it legitimately just came into existence recently, there's no record of this thing. And I didn't catch the name of the guy they said is the head of it. It didn't sound like a Middle Eastern name, but it's not very good. I didn't see between rounds. Some of it was hard to see between rounds because the American broadcast would stick in commercials between rounds, but it didn't look like this so-called commission had any inspectors going to the fighters' corners in between rounds to see what was going on. And there's another thing in connection, we'll get to Aiba. One of the sponsors was Green Hill Sports. And Green Hill is mentioned part of the corrupt schemes in Aiba in the McLaren Report. And Green Hill was originally formed in Pakistan. Its website said now it's headquartered in Dubai. It sells boxing and sports and combat sports and martial arts equipment. And they were like a big sponsor for this thing. Then we looked in the governance. There were a lot of Filipinos in the crowd, by the way, and it looked like that's who they aimed selling tickets to, because some of the earlier bouts had a Filipino referee, and he got the loudest cheers of the crowd, that even more than the fighters. So Casimiro was supposed to be the main event. They figured it would be a showcase and the defense for him. And they also had the veteran Donnie Nietes in a supporting fight that became the co-main feature. Now, he's a really good fighter. He's 39 years old, and he was fighting a Dominican fighter named Jimenez. And this was supposed to be a WBO title eliminator fight. So you would think it would be a 12-round fight. And if you looked during the fight, it said on BoxRec and other places, 12 rounds. So early in the fight, Nietes was clearly winning. He hurt Jimenez a couple of times. He thought, oh, maybe he's going to end the fight early. But then he faded. Again, he's 39. He's a veteran. And Jimenez adjusted and came forward. But the announcers were saying on the TV, at least the English language broadcast, that it was a 10-round fight. And even though this was legitimately a close fight, people expected by the 9th and 10th round, knowing it was a close fight and that the house fighter was Nietes, who's a Probellum fighter, that Jimenez would really step it up. But he didn't. He probably won those rounds, but it looked like he was saving his strength, his energy for what he thought were the 11th and 12th rounds. So the 10th round ends. Nietes goes back to his corner and takes off his gloves. And Jimenez's corner is sitting there, giving him water and wiping him off, getting ready for round 11. They had not been informed
Oh,
that it had been
shit.
changed from a 12-round fight to a 10-round
What?
fight.
That's
And
insane. That's
so,
insane.
so one of the guys running the show, and again, Schaefer was not there, apologized and said, "Oh, we decided to change it for TV purposes." Now, this is supposed to be a WBO title eliminator, and a title eliminator, especially with a veteran like Nietes, is usually 12 rounds. Okay, so why did it end in 10 rounds? Who's making these decisions? The TV, the promotion. So between the WBO and this unknown commission, it seems like the promotion and the TV people are making this decision. So then it went to the scorecards after 10 rounds. The scores for the 10 rounds were not bad, surprisingly. One judge gave it 96-94 for Jimenez, one had it 96-94 for Nietes, another had it 95-95. It was a split draw. It was a close fight up to those 10 rounds. I didn't score it round by round, but you couldn't really argue with those. And it was somewhat of an upset because most people expected this would be a showcase because Jimenez is not well known, but that's what happened in the what turned out to be the semi-main event. Then in the main event, they had Sonny Edwards, the IBF flyweight champion, against a mandatory Jason Mama. Edwards is from the UK, Mama from the Philippines. Both came in with a record of 16-0, but Edwards had a better resume. And it started off as a pretty dirty, ugly fight. A lot of clinching, hitting on the break, rabbit punches, holding. It looked like Jason Mama was more guilty of that, and the referee wasn't doing very much. But after a couple of rounds, they settled down, and Edwards was just too fast and too skilled as a boxer. He's not a big puncher. He doesn't have a lot of knockouts. He did score a knockdown in the 10th round, and he won a very wide unanimous decision, which was deserved, but it was against a mandatory. And of course, he wants to get a unification fight with Martinez. We'll see whether that happens. And of course, Dubai is where hiding out is the alleged, quote unquote, mob boss, Daniel Kinahan, friends with Tyson Fury. And it's interesting that with this card, a day or two before, a UFC fighter who's associated with Kinahan posted on social media a picture of him gleaming and smiling in
No
Dubai with
shame.
Kinahan. So Kinahan might be coming in from the shadows again. And again, of course, I'm sure this is a big coincidence right before the Probellum fight. My favorite tweet was from, this is obviously a comedy account, somebody called Money Mauricio Suleiman at Money Mauricio BX. And he wrote, "Fun fact, Probellum is Latin for, quote, no extradition treaty with Ireland." That was, I thought that
Oh
was
my
pretty funny.
God.
They have
So
no
they have
shame.
another card. They got another card next week on the 18th again, and we'll see what happens with that. But a lot of bad warning signs. I mean, the fight like with Nietes and Jimenez was fun to watch because you expected Nietes to walk through this guy, and it ended up being a close fight. And Jalalov, even the announcers said before it started, this won't take long. But have a cruiserweight fighting the super heavyweight, undefeated pro heavyweight, Olympic gold medalist. How could you allow, and a guy that 5 or 6 weeks before had already been knocked out. This is what the kind of stuff that you expect. And if this is the direction they're going to go in, there's going to just be a lot of problems because, as I said, they don't have a major TV deal. I don't know what the terms were, even of them getting on Access TV, because 11 o'clock in the morning, I think Access TV would just be showing repeats of rock and roll videos and interviews and things like that. Like before that, they had a Dan Rather interviewing Cyndi Lauper. I don't know when
Mhm.
that took
Concerts
place. So,
and shit, right?
Yeah,
yeah,
but the
but
other thing is that there was a big announcement that they had made this deal to it was out in a lot of press that they had made this deal with ASX and Fight TV, not Fight TV, but Fight Night, to be able to show broadcasting of the
yeah,
Probellum fights.
free
Yeah,
sports in the UK.
in UK and also in Canada. So that's really
Right, Fight
fascinating.
Network, yeah.
Fight Network in Canada.
But
So
few people watch those things.
well,
I
that's
had,
it. I didn't even know these stations existed when I was looking for them, because who the heck watches them? And so there's obviously been no marketing done. The other thing, a couple of things. What's interesting is on BoxRec, the commission is noted as Dubai Boxing Commission. Not that we can always trust BoxRec, but that's who, when this fight was listed, that's who was put down as the commission. And
changes
the other,
its name every day.
yeah, and the other question that I have is, okay, so they have an IBF World Fly title. How did they get that fight? Did they do a purse bid on it? I mean, how did that happen? And given that this was such a comedy show, are the big guys like IBF or WBA, WBC, whatever, are they going to continue with Probellum if they can't get their act together going into the future? So these are big questions to me.
They can lose potential sponsorship deals and partnership
There's a
deals
lot of
for being
questions about
shitty
where the
productions.
money,
Yeah.
yeah, there's a lot of questions where the money came from so quickly for them to, they held it in an arena called the Coca-Cola Arena. I don't know what the attendance was. I don't know how many were paid. It really looked like they had to lose a lot of money, which in the beginning, which is not necessarily a red flag, but what's their plan? You need TV, you need streaming. We're going into 2022, and I understand that in terms of broadcast, they'd be aiming more at the UK and Ireland and the rest of Europe and Russia and the Middle East, and that the US would be secondary for them. That would probably make sense in some ways for them to do that, but they still need some kind of stronger TV deal. And yet they're coming up with these 2 cards in a row there. It just raises a lot of red flags. And then to have Greenhill, if you read the McLaren report that just came out, they just really go into the role that Greenhill and its subsidiaries played in corruption in Aiba. And now all of a sudden they're back with this professional card.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it just smells. But I mean, what one can understand that the first go around on a broadcast deal might be a little shaky,
Right.
especially in an environment that is not used to showing these kinds of fights or broadcasting these kind of fights. Look, the early fights on DAZN were pretty stinky too, in terms of cameras not matching, too dark. I'm noticing the same thing on the UFC Fight Night stuff on some of their boxing matches. Not exactly as premier as the way a Showtime bout looks, or even an ESPN bout, but to allow these kind of shenanigans on a card is unacceptable. To have a guy who's 5 weeks away from getting knocked out in a bout, those kinds of things are huge red flags. And the questions need to be asked of Probellum: how are you going to get your act together and become professional? Because again, maybe the first time you allow them a little slack on their recording or their television issues, but you can't screw around with the card and expect that people are going to pay money to see it, or that they're going to be able to sustain themselves with real boxing cards. So it's just going to end up a clown show,
Right. And Richard Schaefer should know better. He was at Golden Boy forever. You were at Golden Boy. Then you did Star Promotions or something. And now you're doing this. You should know better. He should have this handled way better.
Yeah, they lost their main event.
Right.
They had the mismatch the thing with the heavyweights and the crap about switching it from 12 rounds to 10 rounds in the Nietes Jimenez fight.
That's some bullshit.
And a dicey sponsor running in Dubai with an unknown commission that we're not even sure if what the name is, let alone it exists, and what they how
Mhm.
they actually regulate it. That's different than you could rack that up, the TV production, the lighting and the
Right.
stuff like that, the technical problems. Those are different things. We're talking about stuff that's just straight up corrupt.
Right.
Absolutely. Absolutely right, Eddie. As I said, you can forgive them one bad television production,
Right.
but they have to get their act together in terms of how these fights are being governed at the
Mhm.
most basic level, like ensuring that they're inspectors. How are these gloves being inspected? I mean, there's just so many levels to what fair fights are to keep the boxers
Mhm.
safe. And that's at the end of the day what this is
Starting
all
with the
about.
matchmaking.
Yeah.
Shit.
So, and then, we look at Probellum, we look at where it is, we look at who the players are, aside from Richard Schaefer, what are their relationships to the old MTK Global Group?
Mm.
Is there a Kinahan relationship? Who are the sponsors? Are there interconnected situations there that really smack of corruption? And that's something we need to follow up and really look at, because whether it's, just because we're based in the United States, we're sitting here looking at governance of boxing around the world. And,
Right.
Whether American fighters are on those cards or not, this is safety issues and governance issues. And if you are IBF and you have a main event on a card that has this many problems, how many more times are you going to be willing to put your fighters on that kind of card?
Right.
As long as they get their money.
So long as they get paid, that's all that matters.
Yeah,
Well,
get
we'll see
sanction
there
fees.
too, right? Whether they actually get paid.
Right. That's too. So Eddie, do you want to talk about McLaren's report and the
I want to
IOC's
talk a little about the
recommendation?
IOC first. And the reason is that as we're recording this on Sunday, the 12th, that's the day that by a Zoom meeting, the conclusion of the Aiba, the International Boxing Association, which is the Olympic Boxing Federation, will be having their special, what they call extraordinary Congress. And on Monday, the 13th, there's supposed to be a press conference with the president of Aiba, Umar Kremlev, and we're going to find out what changes, if any, they've made. They said they're going to make a lot of changes. But what happened during the week that just ended, Thomas Bach, the head of the IOC, and the IOC put out a report about Aiba, which, as we know, has been suspended for the last couple of years. And they specifically singled out boxing, weightlifting, and modern pentathlon as sports that were not included on the program of the Los Angeles 2028 Olympics at this point. And they made a distinction where they put boxing and weightlifting in one group. Bach called them their problem children of the Olympic movement. And I'll reserve maybe for another time about what's been going on in weightlifting, which involves a lot more about doping and governance and all kinds of stuff. But in terms of Aiba, they specifically said, and I actually think their tone might have been a little softer than it's been, but they said for Aiba to get reinstated and to get back on the program of guaranteed sports for Los Angeles in 2028, which is implying that if it's not, they might just drop boxing. That Aiba must, quote, demonstrate that it has successfully addressed the ongoing concerns around its governance, its financial transparency and sustainability, and the integrity of its refereeing and judging processes. And what they did say was that added to the program of 2028 while these other sports, we don't know what's going to be happening. They said they're going to be adding a couple of other sports. Let me get a list of these things, which would skateboarding was one of them. I thought I had the list here. That these are on the program for 2028 instead of boxing. I'll look up maybe somebody could look up the list. I thought it had it.
So wait, so Eddie, if the organization Aiba is not around, does not exist, are you telling me amateur boxing in the Olympics does not exist?
We don't know, because in the Tokyo Olympics, the IOC organized it directly. Boxing is still on, for now, on the program for 24 in Paris, but it's not yet on the program for 28. That was what the executive board meeting was discussing. Now they've laid out what they call the pathway, which is what I read about. And what they seem to be implying, that if they don't do things to their satisfaction, they might just dump it completely. And one of the specific things they raised about finances is that the Aiba's been in big debt for several years, a lot of bad deals and corrupt looking deals that, again, the McLaren Report, I encourage people to look it up. A lot of this stuff is in detail. But the IOC also raised, although McLaren didn't raise it, the issue of Gazprom, which is the Russian state-run gas monopoly. And the main funding for Aiba now seems to be a contract that Aiba made with Gazprom for them to be what they call a general partner. The IOC wanted to look at this contract, which it said, by the way, in the press release that put it out, they were not going to reveal the contents. And the IOC said, we want to know the contents. And they told the IOC, no, you can't see it. We have a non-disclosure agreement. So they brought in the auditing firm EY, which used to be Ernst & Young, and they apparently looked at it. And the IOC looked at the terms of this, and it looks like they got a lot of money up front. The contract goes to the end of 22, but they might run out of that in the middle of 2022. And the terms of the contract, what does Aiba have to do to fulfill the terms of the contract? That what deals do they have to make? That's not entirely clear from what's going on. And does this contract, since it's with a mainly state-owned and state-run gas monopoly of Russia, does this tie Aiba too closely to the Russian government, which creates a conflict of interest? And particularly of all governments, Russia, known for its corruption in the Olympic movement. And it's something that Aiba has done a lot, become dependent on just one source of funding. So what are they going to do after the middle of 2022? That's not really clear. The McLaren Report talks about the refereeing and the judging, that even as recently as the recent tournaments that Aiba had this year, they found evidence of bout manipulation. Otherwise, we just call it more simply fight fixing. And that a lot of the culture of corruption and the way the judges and referees carried out what they're supposed to be their duties and was selected, that had remnants of what had gone on in Rio 2016, where there had been open manipulation, and that has not been completely wiped out. And in terms of governance, there was a set of proposals that Aiba had from reports from Professor Ulrich Haas of the University of Zurich, which presumably they're going to adopt at their Congress. And that would include cleaning out the majority of the senior leadership of Aiba, including a lot of these characters that were around and in positions of power from during Rio 2016, and some of them even before, that led to all of this corruption. So we're going to find out soon what they're really going to do. I will say that the McLaren report, while it deals with up to, just a few months ago, some of these tournaments, what they said was bad governance and corruption, was very positive about Kremlev. And they said things like, it's evident that Kremlev has brought in several changes and has launched a genuine process of reform. And also they said there's a genuine attempt at reform and progress has been made under Kremlev's leadership. So we're going to see what they actually do. A lot of these are nice words, and whether they start to clean house and how far they could do it, because the other factor is you could want to clean house and you're facing resistance from corrupt elements, that the non-corrupt, the honest elements want to clean house. So we'll see what happens. The McLaren report talked of three main motivations, a couple of main motivations for the corruption in Aiba. One was financial reward, in other words, gifts or money or bribes. The other was nationalism, where cliques of Russian-speaking or French-speaking referees and judges would fix fights to help people in their countries. And the other one they called betting scams. Criminal syndicates have long been associated with martial arts, combat sports, and due to its heritage, boxing has been a major victim of their activities, the McLaren report said. But they didn't have a way to really investigate that fully. But not surprising, gambling is involved in all these areas of corruption. So we're going to see what Aiba says and what they do and how well this works. And I would add, we're also going to see, does the IOC have other motives in this? In other words, if they just decided boxing is too much of a problem, let's get rid of it. We already have other combat sports, wrestling, judo, taekwondo, other combat sports really want to get on the Olympic program, Sambo, Muay Thai, even much further down the road, MMA. Are they looking in this, what do we need all this shit for? Maybe we should just get rid of boxing. A boxer died recently, several months ago, at one of the Aiba tournaments in I think in Jordan. And they said, what do we need all this crap for? Because it just seems to be endless. And the person who was in charge of this whole reform commission is Nenad Lalovich, the head of the UWW, the Olympic Wrestling Federation. And if you did a McLaren report into Olympic wrestling, I think you'd find many of the same accusations about wrestling. Some of the names and places would be changed, but I think you'd find a lot of the same crap that was accused in terms of governance and in terms of bout manipulation and so forth. They've been a little slicker about it. But if you want, do your own research into Mikhail Mamashvili and Ruziev, two longtime members of the top leadership of UWW. So is something else going on now? The sort of wrestling versus boxing conflict? I don't really know, but is the IOC holding Aiba to a higher standard, since so much of the same crap goes on in many of these other federations? We're gonna find out. So there's a lot of things going on, but Aiba, as I said, it does appear there are elements in it trying to clean up their act. So let's
Clean
see
it
what
up,
they
or
actually.
you are history. Clean it
Yeah.
up, or you are
So,
gone.
Or it could be both. They could clean it up, and they still could be history.
Right.
Is my point.
yeah.
We'll
So
find out.
the three sports, Eddie, were skateboarding, surfing, and sport climbing. Which
Sport,
would
what? Climbing.
sport climbing. Take one of the
Oh,
original
Lord.
sports from the Greek Olympics on Mount Olympus.
All right. Well, all
Can
right.
it with corruption? Just
Because
another
young
comment.
people in LA would maybe more interested in that.
Yeah,
I
we could
guess,
get on
but
that tip.
But meanwhile, in terms of boxing, and the issue of sports gambling, we're on the pro side of the game. We're now in a situation where major sports betting organizations sponsor televised boxing. You have it on Showtime to the point where their people have to give you the line before every fight. You have it on DAZN. I mean, it's blatant. So what is we haven't even touched the surface of what that's all about. But it's interesting that that is a finding or a potential finding for the corruption at Aiba, and it would be curious to trace out what those relationships are, what kind of sports organizations or gambling organizations they're really talking about. Are they legalized gambling organizations, semi-legal? I mean,
I think they're referring to illegal,
Right.
but legalized gambling means they legalize the illegal gambling operation.
Exactly.
and corruption right in front of you, where you're literally doing it round by round on a betting
Caesar's
line.
Sportsbook. Have you seen those ads?
Yeah,
so
or
now that's
MGM Sportsbook,
Yeah.
MGM Bets.
Exactly.
That's what they have, big signs all down Las Vegas Boulevard, MGM Bets.
Exactly. Yeah. So, that
Sports
this
betting
is something
huge. Yeah.
that, is going to be a major issue ongoing just in pro sports, never mind how it affects amateur boxing.
Right on. Well, look, we're going to move right on into our next topic, which is women's boxing. What's going on? I know Katie Taylor served it up this weekend.
Katie
Give
Taylor
us the
sure did.
rundown.
She had a mandatory WBA mandatory with Fizura Sharipova, who's had been 14-0. She 14-1. Sorry, she is a fighter out of Kazakhstan, kind of an unknown in terms of the sort of elite level of women's boxing that we're used to. A lot of her fights were in Russia. In fact, I think all of them pretty much were in Russia. Or
What was her record?
She was 14-0
Okay.
coming into her fight with Katie Taylor. I mean, the last two fights that she had were against debut fighters, were fighters with like one fight.
Right,
so
right.
that didn't count so
Mismatch.
much. And that's in 21. She had one in April, one in September, and then she had a fight the year before in Moscow with a 7-7 fighter that was, which you could find it on YouTube, was, did not look very good. So there were certainly some questions coming into this fight with Katie Taylor. I will say she was very, very sure of herself in all of her media events. She kept talking about how she was going to wipe the floor with Katie Taylor, knock her out. And even Eddie Hearn in the lead up to the fight yesterday on DAZN was talking about how Sharipova was trying to like psych Katie Taylor out all week. So using, old
Mind games.
Soviet style mind games to get into
Vulcan
Katie
mind
Taylor's
games.
head. Yeah,
They'll
exactly.
say anything to hype a fight.
Absolutely.
Anything
So
to
this
hype.
is literally 5 minutes before the fight's going on. So that was really funny. But, I have to say Sharipova, who, as I said, was an unknown quantity coming in, she had really good skills, and she's got a very lethal right hand. She has some knockouts in her career, and she made a good accounting of herself.
Yeah,
Folks
good.
who were watching it, boxing Twitter was kind of like, "Hey, Katie, what are you doing there?" Some folks had, Katie losing the first two rounds. Me, I had it 1-1, but it wasn't necessarily a close fight. But Sharipova really worked hard in the ring. I think she was not as fast as Katie, and she did not have the experience at that level. She hasn't had to fight, at the high level, high elite level of world of world championship bouts in her pedigree. So certainly there was a lot for her to learn, but she was not a walkover by any means. She really did have some skills and someone that we can watch into the future. She started, pretty much to fade in the later rounds. But what she revealed about Katie was that Taylor is, she's fast, she's quick, but she was getting tagged because she wasn't able to just defend herself fast enough. Her hands are down a lot, which is fine if you can stay out of the way, but she wasn't moving enough.
Right.
The other thing is Taylor was throwing a lot of punches, but she was not in the pocket. She never touched Sharipova. And there's a lot, especially in the earlier rounds, she was really at distance and never got to her. And even her corner said, oh, well, that's okay. Just keep going, keep going in and then you'll get to her eventually. But to me, it was a little bit of a warning sign, especially if she's going to go up against somebody like Serrano. That is not going to fly. No. So I think as a tune-up for Serrano, which is presumably will be her next fight, this Sharipova certainly put Taylor through her paces. Taylor did not get tired. I mean, she was able to sustain
great conditioning.
10 rounds.
Taylor has great conditioning.
Her conditioning is top notch, but she wasn't showing heavy hands particularly, and her defense was off. And I'm not going to say that she was sluggish. That wasn't it. She just didn't seem on top form.
Yeah,
she was
off, having a bad day.
She was a little off, and if she's going to fight Serrano, which, as I said, is being hyped as the next fight in Madison Square Garden sometime in the spring.
I'm going with Serrano on that fight.
Taylor is going to have to really do some work in the gym to add some additional dimensions to her game and to stop being so predictable. And that was something that even Sharipova was able to get out of the way for. Sort of earlier in the fight, she was getting tagged more. By the end of the fight, she was tired. She was getting tagged a little bit, but she was able to respond and even took the 9th round really clearly because she could really see what Taylor was going to do. So Taylor will have her work cut out for her if she really expects to be able to defeat Serrano. That will have to be basically the best fight of her life, or certainly what her earlier.
Come with it.
So with Serrano, she's on the clown show with her sponsor, Josh Paul next weekend.
Hey, look, she got to make her money some kind of way. Let them.
Yeah, she's making a lot. Listen, Katie Taylor is certainly making a lot of money these days, which is good for her. And Serrano is going to do well in her fight against Gutierrez next week. And then again, there's discussions about putting together this big mega fight, which Eddie Hearn is hyping as the biggest fight in women's boxing ever. Well, okay, that's debatable. Certainly for this era, maybe it'll certainly be the biggest money fight in this era. And in terms of the lethality of Serrano, she's got heavy hands and 40 KOs, and she's really chasing Christy Martin's record of 42 KOs. So she wants that badly, and she'll want to win against Katie Taylor by KO because she's going to want to come out of that fight.
Right.
Well, something to prove, and also say, hey, I am so far and above the best woman fighter that ever fought. I've got 7 different, weight classes with belts. I'm undisputed, and I defeated the queen. Long live the queen. So long live the empress is what it's going to look like. So there's a lot there. One other thing I want to say, I mean, there's a lot of women's boxing coming up. There's been a lot on Twitter about the super featherweight division. That's with Alicia Baumgartner had that terrific win over Terry Harper. You've got Michaela Mayer who just won. So we got a whole lot of belts out there. And in terms of what happens next, we still have Choi of South Korea with a belt. Somebody's got to fight her to get her belt.
Oh, we got a lot to talk about.
A lot of undisputed. So there's that. So there's a lot that's going to come up in 2022. But the thing I want to complain about for 2 minutes is there were 4 big cards yesterday. There was DAZN. There was Showtime. There was Top Rank and Probellum. Okay, Probellum's new, but they were trying to make a big splash. Only one card had a female fight, and that was DAZN. And that is disgraceful. I'm sorry. That is a disgrace.
The most popular sports star in Ireland, too. It wasn't just any fight. Somebody that had is a huge star in Ireland.
Mhm.
Yes, and in the UK. I mean, and look, that card was out of Liverpool. It had Conor Benn, who's a very popular in England, fighting an older Chris Algieri to try to make his bones at 147 at welterweight.
I thought Chris Algieri retired.
Now he was back in
No?
the ring, and man, he got his crap kicked out of him. He had a Ben had a KO that, I mean, Algieri went bomb. Good night. That was crazy. But where the hell were the female fights yesterday?
Right.
Where was it on Showtime? Where was it on Top Rank? That's number one. Number two,
It's not a priority. It
I
just
know.
isn't.
That's
rank.
where there was this discussion on Twitter about these are going to be huge fights if Michaela Mayer fights somebody or Serrano versus Taylor. Will they be extremely important? Yes. Are they going to be huge fights in terms of business and the audience? Certainly not in the United States. If you
Mhm.
rarely even see them. How many
Exactly.
people watch the Katie Taylor fight was on in the US on Saturday afternoon on DAZN when people might have been doing other stuff, and you already had in the US on bigger TV networks, the Top Ranked show on ESPN and the other card that was on Showtime.
On
headed
Showtime.
by
Exactly
Donaire, the
right.
BBC card. So
And
how many
here's-
people watch Katie Taylor in the United States? How many people know who she is? Obviously that's not right, but if you don't put her in the main event of these kind of cards on ESPN and Showtime and places like that, people aren't going to know her.
That is the whole point.
Right.
If you're not putting, if Top Rank is only putting Michaela Mayer on a card, well, how the hell is women's boxing going to grow? What the fuck, So I really had a bone to pick. That was number one. Secondly, Top Rank has this Ali grandson, right? Nico. You would think he was the second coming. I mean, the kid can't box, but that's neither here nor there. They go on and on and on. Oh, his grandfather, blah, 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 blah. Well, guess what? The boy has an auntie named Layla Ali, who was in the International Boxing Hall of fucking Fame,
Right.
and they never mention her. They never mention there's another Ali in the Hall of fucking Fame. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? I was so pissed. This is 2 different times this kid's been on these cards, and they go on and on and on.
And who
on.
commented on his
On the
fight?
Ali legacy?
Right.
I mean, you're talking Ali legacy. Well,
The
Layla
commentators
Ali
on
was
Top
the-
Rank.
Hey, you're Andre Ward. Okay, he was
We
there.
can call his ass out on
Jim-
Twitter.
I did. Did I get a response?
No.
Timothy Bradley. Zip. Because the
Mhm.
bosses didn't say anything. I don't know why. Don't ask me. All I know
That's
is
just lame as hell, though,
zero.
not to recognize Layla Ali as part of the Ali boxing family. It's history.
They worked for ESPN, and the ESPN show had a certain narrative that went
I
on.
know.
They have this Nico Ali Walsh kid, and not only do they push him because he's Ali's grandson, and his mother and Ali, one of Ali's former wives, was in the crowd. They showed all them, but who used to promote some of Ali's fights was sitting in the front row, Bob Arum, and it was
I
also
know.
his 90th birthday, and they
Mm.
had the arena led by Tyson Fury, and it's assuming the BWAA, which is the Boxing Writers Association of Arum, sitting there ringside in the media
Yeah,
section,
and the grandson,
singing-
his grandson.
all
Yeah.
singing happy birthday to the
Oh, boy.
promoter. Yesterday I was lying, today I'm telling the truth. That was the whole narrative of this thing, that Arum is the continuation of the Ali legacy.
Oh, God.
That was
spare
it.
me.
And so my joke was that with this Nico Ali Walsh guy, they're going to find some opponent for him named Fraser and have Ali Walsh, they call it Ali Fraser 5.
That's
You know,
right,
and-
because there was an Ali Frazier 4, and it was called
Which
Layla Ali and
Ali.
Jackie Frazier
Right.
right.
at on a Boxing Hall of Fame weekend, right? So it's like,
Wow.
give me a break. I just was fit to be tied yesterday. I didn't even want to watch the rest of the card. I turned it off, and finally, it's like, oh, Loma's fighting. Okay, I'll watch him because, well, he's just, to me, he's poetry.
Yeah,
watching
he's
him fight.
he's great to watch. I like
He was
him.
poetry last night.
Yeah.
He really looked
Regained
beautiful.
his form, yeah.
He really
At
did.
least
He
against
was,
Richard Commey. And Jared Anderson is a guy they're really pushing, and he got another early knockout. So
yeah. So, there was some good stuff on there, but it just ticked me off. It ticked me off there were no women on the cards.
Oh, you should be mad, damn it. We're all
It ticked
mad.
me
We gotta
off,
fix this shit.
That there's just no respect to Queen Layla. She did
That's
a
all
lot
right.
for boxing, and she is in the International Boxing Hall of
and
Fame.
she fought in the garden too.
Yes, she
Right.
did. She fought in the
I was
garden. There was
there.
another Ali that fought in the garden. Zero. Absolutely zero. I think these people should be ashamed
Right.
because
Timothy Bradley and Andre Ward, you guys better recognize now. Next
Recognize.
time.
Layla Ali
the
is
queen.
this kid's aunt.
Yes, exactly. And Auntie Layla
That's
is
right.
in the
How you gonna leave out
International
Auntie
Hall of
Layla?
Fame.
That's crazy.
Exactly. So that was,
Right.
I was a
And
little
whatever
ticked.
reason she wasn't there, because I don't know.
She wasn't,
was
and she
money
wasn't in the last fight. So maybe
Yeah,
there's
she doesn't go to
issues with the
fights.
family. I don't care.
Yeah.
Right. Who cares?
Mention her
Right.
Mention as a fighter, yes. As a
as
fighter,
a fighter.
you have to mention.
You have
Whatever's
to
going on with the
mention
family and the money, forget about it. Don't
that.
worry
That's not for us to say, but do
Right.
say somewhere that the Ali legacy lives on to a third generation, because
That's
the
right.
second generation represented.
That's
because
right.
There you
they're
go.
not journalism. When you watch these shows, they have a contract with Top Rank, and the promotion develops the narrative. And if that isn't part of their narrative, because Layla Ali is not part of Top Rank, and I don't think she ever was.
No,
And if
she
they
wasn't.
don't like her for whatever reason, she doesn't exist.
No,
And you have
you're right. You're right. The only person who was actually at that time, the person represented by Time Rank was Mia St. John.
Mm.
Right? They dropped
Christy Martin.
No, Christy Martin was with
Weren't they supposed to do Christy
Don
Martin
King.
and Cia Riker?
Yeah, they were supposed to, and then Lucia Riker had an injury, and
Right, and they
but
never
Riker
followed.
was not with Top Rank at that time. Bob Arum had dropped her in favor of Mia St. John. Basically, Christy Martin was light pink, was baby pink, and Mia St. John was hot pink.
Hot pink,
And
right?
on the cover of Playboy with two red
Mhm.
boxing gloves in front of her naked boobies. So there you go. That was Bob Arum back in the day.
And that's the connection between, make another connection, because I made a connection between the Aiba and Probellum. That's another connection between the Aiba story and women's boxing, that most of the American so-called boxing media doesn't care, because they are loyal not to journalism, not to the truth, not to reality, but to the promoters and networks that hire them as propagandists to do infomercials for them.
Right. Well, you're not going to get that here at the War Room. This
Yep.
is all about truth, honor.
Truth. But you
That's
are
right.
so right, Eddie. And it's a damn shame, because boxing is dying in this country. And
It sure
it's
is.
just pathetic.
And what's
certainly-
going to be the effect if the IOC says no more boxing in the Olympics, not just Aiba, because federations can come and go. But if they say that's it, boxing is off the program of the Olympics, which means that it's a little different in the US, but most countries, the boxing federation is funded from the government because it's an Olympic federation. If it's no longer part of the Olympics, there goes your funding, the amateur programs. What effect is that going to do? How many top professional boxers went through the amateurs, became Olympic medalists or Olympic champions that we even mentioned today? Katie Taylor, Lomachenko, and so many others were gold medalists in the Olympics. If there's no more gold medalists, no more Olympic boxing, that will trickle down and really affect the pros.
I absolutely agree with you. Even last night, to Andre Ward's credit, so we'll give him a plus here. The fact that, you know, the Olympics came up, and the fact that Clarissa Shields had won 2 gold medals in the Olympics. And don't know who asked Ward, said, and Ward said, you know, she's the only one that ever did 2 gold medals. And then someone said something like, well,
She's
did
an
you even
ESPN
try?
fighter.
Right.
She
Did you
fought on
even?
MMA.
Yeah, I got you there. But the point was, somebody said, well, did anybody else really even try for 2? Did you? And Ward said, yeah, I did. And I didn't get the gold.
Wow.
So there was some like little, you know,
Digs.
you know,
did he
real
try for
shady
2?
stuff going on in there.
When
But
did
you
he
know,
try for
Ward,
2?
he did try for 2. He didn't get 2.
In
But there was a
2008?
little, yeah, there was a little shady stuff though.
I thought he had turned pro after 2004.
Yeah, but he did try for 2, and he came to Clarissa's defense. So, you know, he's like 1 for 1 for me.
Yeah. Katie
last
Taylor
night.
tried for 2 and didn't
And
get the
didn't,
second
but there's
one.
question though, you know, whether her fight result got tainted in Rio 2016. So who knows?
Exactly. All that dirty fight fixing crap going on. Exactly.
It's one of the fights that was being looked at, but we'll
Right.
never know.
Yeah, I just should add that McLaren Report said they were not in a position to make a legal determination. That word legal is important, which fights were fixed, because
Wow.
first of all, they're not boxing experts. Second of all,
Right.
it is a certain amount of subjectivity in boxing scoring. And third of all, legally, they'd have to show they'd have to show proof of some kind of bribery or corruption or coercion or something like that. And they weren't in a, which is very difficult to get, but they looked at bouts that were very suspicious, beyond even the ones that, you know, the Mick Conlon, Nikitin fight, and the other one that took place in the Olympics, both of which involved, surprise, Russian fighters getting suspicious decisions. So
Right on.
it's
Well,
all
look,
connected.
folks, it is all connected, and we're going to keep on this story. We're going to follow up again and keep you guys posted on what's going on with our amateur boxing program, because it is an important aspect to develop young talent in this country, and we need the amateur program, and we need it to be as corruption-free as possible. Okay, so we have to keep highlighting these stories. In the meantime, that's all we have for you guys today, folks. You guys want to tell the people where they can find you, Eddie, Mr. Goldman? Where can the people find you on
Yeah.
social media?
Social media is mainly on Twitter at NHB News. Come on, I'm also discussing a lot of political, non-sport stuff, and sometimes I put up some interesting and fun music or movie clips, just to have
All right.
a little levity on there. You can go to my website, eddiegoldman.com, and subscribe on my Patreon. I had a long article before the IOC and McLaren reports came out about can anybody clean up pro and Olympic boxing on my Patreon. That's patreon.com/Eddie Goldman. You can support independent journalism by subscribing to that. And hopefully I'll have a follow-up article after we find out what happened at the Aiba conference, Congress, and Kremlin's press conference. And also, of course, you could buy some No Holds Barred with Eddie Goldman gear on my Redbubble page, and
That's
show
right.
give the finger to the promoters and show that you stand for some honesty and fairness in the combat sports.
That's right. All right, Melissa, tell everybody where they can find you on social media.
Okay, on Twitter and Instagram, I am at Girl Boxing Now. And do a lot on women's boxing in general. The occasional Spotify list for my music. I gotta
right
say,
on.
I'll be doing a couple more, putting those out pretty soon. I also have a website, girlboxing.org. I do blog pieces about every 10 days or so. And also have a media page on other articles that I'm quoted in, as well as WAAR Room stuff. So I really hope to see you on the page.
Right on. Thank you guys for tuning in. I am your fight goddess. You can follow me on Instagram at La Fight Goddess. You can check us out online at WAAR Sports, WAAR Sports.com. And we will see you next time. Peace, love, and push-ups.